going to find that out very soon.
Well, you know, there's another thing too. I've had over the last 20 years so many cameras on me.
Oh, Lord.
I'm at the point where it's okay. There's
Well, that's
another
good.
camera.
Yeah, so you're actually cool with it. Well, that's nice.
I've had cameras in extremely invasive that can be done to me anymore. This is exactly what I was thinking about.
It is?
Nightshade presents Dr. Burisch blamed for La Quinta fire. Oh, lovely. George Knapp here. Oh,
Reporting
lovely.
from La Quinta.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, and I'm very pleased to be with Dan Burisch.
There,
And,
I just introduced myself.
Well, actually, I would like you to sort of give a brief introduction, who you are and what you're known for. Maybe what
I'm
you'd
known
like to be known for.
Aside from cantankerous activities and disobeying certain authority structures. No, well, I'm a microbiologist, a retired one now, but continuing somewhat the practice involved in a very unusual project called Lotus. I am a 20-year retiree from Majestic, first having been brought in 1986 under the auspices of the Committee of the Majority, and specifically working for the Majestic 12, assigned to Project Aquarius. I suppose I'm more known for meeting a J-Rod and working at S4. Aside from that, I don't really know what I'm known for, aside from irritating a bunch of people on the web that don't want to hear about me.
Okay, so you worked for Majestic, and you were basically, I mean, in brief, and I know there's a really long history
Right,
as
the
to
Lotus
how
was
you
an
ended.
accessory project. It wasn't, you know, it was funded because everything that I was doing at the time was being funded ultimately by them. But it was an accessory project. It wasn't something of a critical nature for the Majestic, or as I believed for a long time. However, the principle of the Lotus ultimately ended up being a rather earth-shaking item for the participants at the T9 conference a couple of years ago.
What is the T9 conference?
During the course of speaking with extraterrestrials and our interactions with them from the 1950s onward, there have been a series of treaties established between we and they meaning a future human intelligence, time travelers. And there have been as a consequence of our relationship with them, there have been more than one treaty system in place. During the last of one of those treaty negotiation and signing times, I had the privilege of being in the presence of the negotiators at the conference, which was held in the state of New Mexico.
And there were how many aliens present at that time?
There were 2, 4, 6, and a few in the strollers behind the curtains. So we had
A few in I'm sorry, what was that reference?
They're unable to cope for long periods of time in our atmosphere. In our
see.
present atmosphere. They've adapted, if you will, to the atmospheres of their particular future timeline. And as a consequence, coming here would be oppressive to them, existing in our standard temperature and our pressure. So they have been provided unique sealed off pressurized systems that they would be moved around in by their attendants, basically on a Segway type transport system, where you can push it and it will actually move forward, very easily maneuverable.
I see. So that's what you meant by stroller
Right.
system.
Right.
Okay.
And so they were encapsulated in their strollers in their positions as negotiators for their time. And
Are you saying that these aliens that were present at this conference that happened, what, this year, last year? A couple years ago. In which they discussed, I'm assuming it was
between
the Lotus.
2003 and 4.
I'm sorry?
Between 2003 and 2004.
Okay, and they discussed the Lotus project
It was brought up, and in fact, as part of the negotiations, the P plus 45,000 group of J-Rods wanted the codes for the Lotus principle added into the treaty negotiations so that they could use it in their own attempts to ameliorate their particular neuropathies.
Wow. So
They
they
wanted to
saw the
use it.
value. They saw the value right away.
They saw a potential value for it, and they wanted to use it for that purpose. It was my argument that it should not be used for a particular purpose, that this is moreover part of a natural system which has been put in place by whatever God is one would want to deign as being the creator of the universe, as part of a natural system and not to be controllable by humankind.
Or by alien kind, by
well,
you
they're
know, by
humans.
inference?
They're
Okay,
human
you
lineage.
consider them humans.
They're humans.
Okay.
They're human beings,
So-
albeit different from what we would expect to see as a human being. But then again, if we look in the history, the presently accepted history of the evolution of humankind, if one were to walk into a conference held by Neanderthals, one would be taken aback. Well, in the same way, one may be taken aback by walking into a conference with these gentlemen.
Okay. So you've got two kinds of aliens, and people that are watching this, some people may have no idea about the T2, two timelines.
Probably not. We actually had three kinds of extraterrestrials, human lineage extraterrestrials present. Two kinds of P plus 45,000 years from now, if we were to translate over to timeline 2. Difficult subjects, aren't they? Two representatives from that time, two representatives from P plus 52,000 years ahead, J-Rods, both of which generally have the anatomical configuration of what would be in ufology called grays,
Okay.
gray aliens, and two representatives from P plus 52,000 Orions, who would generally, I guess, in ufological circles, I guess one could say, would be called Nordics or Tals,
Okay.
who
And
actually
were
look
there-
more human-like but have larger eyes, very blue eyes, blondish hair, etc.
I see. And okay, well, of course, I've got many questions on this score.
So do I.
But and for people listening, we would also like to know: were there any reptilians present?
No, not per se.
Okay.
What I've come to understand, and it's generally held, I think I could say it's generally held within our society, that the notion of a reptilian is a misnomer. And I'm not saying that to apply a negative connotation to the stories that individuals have brought forward, probably mostly forthrightly. But that when you view or observe what would be called a gray, what I would call a J-Rod, the particular ruddy configuration of their skin, the changes of the sudoriferous glandular structure of their skin, can make them appear during exacerbations of the illness very reptilian in appearance, and also possibly praying mantis type in appearance. They're also suffering from a cocaine-like syndrome, which makes them lurch forward, so they appear very praying mantis-like. So I think that possibly many of the accounts which have forthrightly come from individuals whom have actually been abducted by the P-45s have maybe been interpreted as being reptilian in appearance because of their skin structure. But they're not really reptiles.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying, I'm trying to be inclusive here, that there are things in the mind of man and in the glorious universe of God that I don't know. That there's a possibility that individuals have been have encountered alien species not to my reference. Given the fact, I mean, gosh, I've had to accept the fact that there are human beings of that many years ahead of us on another timeline coexisting in reality. How hard would it be for me to accept that there are other extraterrestrials of non-human lineage, of which I've only been briefed about one, which is an extra-dimensional species, whom have referenced other extraterrestrial species that I know nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is it for me to accept that after I've been in the presence of a human lineage extraterrestrial? I don't have a problem with that, but at the same time, I don't have evidence to support it either. Reptilian in that if one were under stress and one had no previous reference to their biology, their pathophysiology, their particular problems, one could reasonably expect out of a group of people experiencing them that more than 50% of the group could probably say that they were reptilian in appearance.
Okay, that's interesting.
But that's the best I
so
can
their
say.
appearance morphs to some degree into more of a reptilian under stress. Is what you're saying?
I mean, maybe
that
you
don't
people
like
could
the word
interpret
morph.
them that way.
Okay.
Reasonably be expected
Visually.
to interpret them that way if they do not have a scientific grounding into what they're looking at.
Sure.
I'm trying to be inclusive of reports of individuals that have no reason to have come forward and say things that they've said for other than the fact that they've experienced something. I'm trying to understand, or maybe help people to understand why they may have interpreted as well.
Sure.
These things in this way. However, they may have actually come into contact with something which was fully reptilian in appearance. I don't know. I haven't.
Exactly.
I'm trying to be honest and at the same time tell people, because apparently it's happened to me, that it's okay.
That apparently
that they were
what's happened.
abducted and that it's happened.
Okay.
That they're not
Apparently,
crazy too.
what has happened to you?
Well, in 1973, I was playing in a park in Southern California in Mayboyer Park, and this is going to probably come out in one or more of the versions of the debriefing with me. I was playing baseball with my grandpa in the park, and I was having him throw me a ball so I could catch it over my shoulder. I was trying to run away at the same time that he would throw the ball so I could try to catch the ball, like Willie Mays' famous catches. During one of these throws of the ball, I remember looking up toward the sun, because it was high in the sky at the time. It was summertime, and glancing away because the sun was blinding me, looking down toward the grass, which was very bright green at the time, and then seeing a flash where the grass appeared to turn black. I appeared, from my perspective, I was covered in a shadow. The shadow reminded me of a triangular bat kite that I had played with my grandfather over the riverbed nearby. And that's the way I basically was able to describe it at the time. I was, 9? I was 9 at the time. Then I remember a flash. Immediately, there's a disjoint memory of this. It's not contiguous. Where I saw my grandfather sitting over by a tree several yards away from me. And the sun had clearly moved in its aspect to me, so time had clearly passed. The earth had moved and time had passed. At least several hours had passed. He was very shook up. I ran over to him, asked him what happened, and he didn't want to talk about it. He said, "You're okay now, you're okay now," and he wanted to go home. So he walked me home immediately over the overpass over Del Amo Boulevard, and we went home. This precipitated a major domestic upset between my grandparents and my mom and dad. Ultimately, this domestic upset resulted in my grandparents moving out. And around that same time, I was having unusual dreams. And in the dream, I would wake up. Do I think that there were probably dreams now? No. But I would wake up and I would walk from my bedroom through the restroom, which connected between my bedroom and a small laundry area that went to a doorway off the north side of our house. And to the right of that laundry area, there was a closet. That's the closet where my grandpa used to put his work jacket and his work boots. He worked at Gaffers and Sattlers as an enamel dipper, dipping pieces in enamel for manually for things like appliances, stoves, etc. And he would come home every day just covered in enamel dots all over his jacket and his boots. And I would open the door to that closet, and that's all I can remember from the dream. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I was meeting somebody called Harry. He was a little friend. And I know that as knowledge that I met a little friend there, but I have no visual memory of what Harry looked like. It was finally, because I finally told my mom and dad about it, and it was finally rationalized away that because I was still watching Sesame Street at the time, that was Oscar the Grouch. And that's the way my mom put it. She said, "You're thinking about Oscar the Grouch because he looks furry and hairy." And from that time on, as the dreams continued, I then remember seeing Oscar the Grouch in my dream, but not in the closet, in the restroom, or past the restroom. But I remember just seeing a picture of Oscar the Grouch, so I felt very calm about it. After that, I accepted it as a boy.
So you were abducted in something that you don't remember the details of. Is that the actual experience once?
Yeah, I told you what the actual memory of it from my boyhood. That is it. Now I remember possibly, and I'm not sure over the years whether this was confabulation or not, because I was a boy at the time. I think I remember seeing a tall person, like if you take a movie frame, like one frame, like a flash of a still picture, mm-hmm. like an iconic memory almost, of a tall person standing next to him at the tree.
Next to your grandpa.
My grandpa, yeah. Okay. And he refused until the day he passed to discuss what happened. He would become extremely agitated. And John and Dodie for certain, who had many conversations with him, and maybe even John would...
this is your father and mother you're talking about.
They're my mom and dad that I grew up with. Now, I've learned certain things about my family since then that are really neither here nor there, having to do with who was actually biological father and biological mother and things like that. But they were my mom and dad. They're my mom and dad. I mean, they're the mom and dad that I remember growing up with, and I... But
they are not MJ1.
No.
Okay, but no. And MJ1, somehow this abduction experience seemed to have resulted in you becoming or being viewed as the son of MJ1. Is that correct?
Right. What happened is this. I also learned of what happened to me from Kaela, the J-Rod that I met at S4. Mm-hmm. He showed me from his perspective what had happened to me in 1973. Mm-hmm. I saw myself being pulled by my chest upward off the surface of the park. I saw my grandfather going like this and basically panicking, crying, because he wasn't able. My grandpa was very protective of me, and he wasn't able to protect me. And now I understand, God bless him, why he was so upset. The one person in his whole life that he knew that he would protect, that he loved that much to protect, he couldn't at that moment. And I understand why he was so upset. But the J-Rod showed me what happened to me, that I was picked up and that I was laid down on a table in some sort of a craft. And that this craft was a generally chevron-shaped, almost triangular shaped craft. And I was laid down next to a series of young people, one of which was in fact the son of the former MJ1. Something went wrong during the course of my time on board the craft when samples were being taken of me for their studies. And the son of the former MJ1 died. During that time, they put some sort of equipment on me. It almost looked like EEG type, a neural net, if you will, of receivers, probes, electrodes, if you will, on me. And they were trying to save, desperately trying to save, and I could see the movement of the J-rods around this other boy. And I know what he looked like and all of that, because I was seeing it through the eyes of Kaela. They were trying to save him, and he ultimately passed. During that time, apparently they were trying with whatever technology that they employ to save the boy by storing him. That Kaela was with the P-45s at the time. These were P-45,000 J-rods. And they looked at us, and they look at us as no more than containers or cylinders, almost like beakers full of material, of electromagnetic material. And so they were trying to store his energy, if you will. Right. Marcia suggested the word vessels. Right. They were trying to store him for a while, I guess, in me. Now, my memory of myself at the time was a rather dull boy that liked to play baseball and with G.I. Joes and things like that. The record of me at the time was that I had an okay acuity in science. That's what the elementary school teachers were saying. I don't remember having acuity like that in science, and there's a disjoint in my own story of myself because of this. Because after I was put down back in the park, over the course of the next couple of years, there were changes in me. But then again, there should have been, because I was growing up. But there was a substantive intellectual change in me, where I was no longer interested in those same things of my youth. Was that maturation? Probably some of it. Was it a change as a result of what was done with me on board the craft? The Majestic thinks so. Thinks that it had something to do with that other boy, because that other boy was known as very bright in the sciences. And all of a sudden, true enough, I got a hankering for Erlenmeyer flasks and boiling flasks and microscopes that I had never had before.
Okay, but...
And I've possessed ever since.
On some level, the MJ1's son that was on the craft next to you, that possibly received a soul transfer from, is the MJ group had to be cognizant of what was going on. In other words,
They knew that had happened.
and they knew during the time.
He's admitted to me that they knew that had happened at the time.
But in other words, was this so you were chosen in a sense?
I believe that I was. The only evidence, I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know. The evidence that I have was that I was, from hearing about the sampling program, was that I was picked up as a random population sample. The son of a blue-collar worker, and just the son of my family was total blue-collar. But there are a lot of coincidences that suggest that people were moved into a place to later teach me that happened before 1973. Can I put my finger on that and say, oh yeah, they knew what was going to happen to me and that I was going to be picked up? I can't say that because I wouldn't be honest. But I get the feeling as though, Marcia has held up 2 letters to me, LG, for looking glass.
Oh,
She
I
knows
see.
more.
I see. I see.
I'm sitting here in the presence of an individual that actually knows more of the truth and cannot tell me, for whatever reason, more of the truth about what's happened to me than I know.
Okay.
She's just held up the letters LG for looking glass. She's indicating to me that they knew.
In other words, and looking glass is the ability to look into the future. So what you're suggesting is that
machine for that use, yeah.
MJ12 was using looking glass, perhaps saw that the first son of MJ1 was going to die, and planned to groom you to carry on.
It's possible.
In his place on some level.
It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never been told by them that.
Did J. Rod's...
Excuse me, but the hints have been, forthcoming that is the reality involved. Because, I mean, even, and I don't know for certain that he was ever read into the program. God bless him, Jim, my mentor, Dr. Jim Reynolds. He was moved into places that almost set him up perfectly for Dodie's call, my mom's call that day, to talk with him at Long Beach Memorial Hospital. And she has since admitted, she admitted to Marcy that she received a sum of money. There are some not good things here, and I still love them both for everything that they've done for me, but yet there's an incompatibility now because I'm still the 8 or 9 year old boy in their eyes that they are willing to try to take sovereignty away from, and it produces an incompatibility in the relationship.
What we're trying to find out, though, is how did you hook up with MJ1 after that? I mean,
well, the first time that I saw him was at the back of the meeting room at the George C. Page Museum when I was a member of the Los Angeles Microscopical Society.
How old were you?
13, 14.
So it was a few years after.
Yeah, it was a few years after I started becoming really interested in all of the beakers and the microscopes and things like that, where I was introduced to Jim Reynolds at Long Beach Memorial Medical Center. Jim Reynolds then introduced my mom and myself to John DeHaas, who was then an associate professor of protozoology, as I understand, at the University of Southern California. He was also the head of DeHaas Optical, a microscope salesman, who then put me in contact with the Los Angeles Microscopical Society at the George C. Page Museum, with whom he was associated as a member, as a senior member, in fact, at the time. During the course of my association with the LA Micro Society, I saw the former MJ1 walk in the back doorway. I sat at the back right of the room, which was where my spot kind of was. And I noticed him just standing back there, and he kind of just blended in with the crowd that was kind of coming and going. And he looked at me, and I looked at him because I noticed he was laying a little too long of a gaze on me. And I was paranoid as it was. I was scared to death just being around these bright people. These were accomplished scientists. Zane Price was one of them, who was the head of the electron micro lab at UCLA. I mean, these were accomplished people. And I noticed he laid this gaze on me from the back of the room, and he took his lighter, and he opened, it was a Zippo lighter, and it had a United States Navy seal on it. And he just popped it and lit it, and closed it up, and walked out the back door. I had no idea who this dude was. Scared to ask anybody because I didn't want to look stupid. You know, I was a geeky teen. Later on, I find out that he just wanted to introduce himself to me early on. He wanted to see where I was in my life at the time. Now, of course, the association was already established because of the son Michael and all of that business from 73. This was like 1975, 76, right in that general time frame.
So, okay.
So that's my first
forward.
meeting with him, but I didn't really meet with him at the time. He showed himself to me.
I understand. And you have since developed a relationship with him such that there is affection there, and he does consider you his son.
He treats me very son-like, yes.
Okay. But would you also say that it's his, he regards you as his son literally, or he must be conscious of the shift or the transfer that took place.
He knows what happened on board. We've had long discussions about this.
Okay.
In fact, during we had an entire night discussion about it one night. You know, I'm trying to do the right things by everybody, and that's the only reason why. To be honest, I mean, my debriefing must come out to the public to the extent that the authentic message, the truthful message of what I've seen, comes out. And that concerns the extraterrestrial issue. But the rest of it, my losing my knees out at Mayboyer Park and falling at the base of the tree where my grandpa was, that's not required. But for people to know that it's not bullshit,